so Annelise. So we're going to share our experience today working with Gutex, which is a German wood fiber insulation product. We used it on our walls and our roof as we built our house recently, which we're standing in right now. What you're looking on the left of this slide here is an overlay of the coal mine map on top of the current aerial in Roslyn. One of our goals as we built, as you might expect, is to get our carbon footprint as low as possible. And we chose Roslyn completely aside from this story, but fun fact, nearly 2 million tons of coal were taken out of Roslyn over the course of its coal mining history. So that kind of put a fine point on our efforts to reduce our carbon footprint generally. So stepping into our Gutex world here.
Yeah, so this is Gutex. It's a wood fiberboard insulation. We're going to call it Gutex the whole time because that's our experience. We are aware of a few other similar products out there. I know Timber HP in Maine is kind of kicking off their factory with similar product offerings, and Steico out of Germany, I believe, or Austria, one of the two, has similar stuff. But we use Gutex. It's basically a compressed wood pulp product that has a paraffin film applied to the outside. How do I get that going there? So the effect of that film is to kind of bead water and shed it from the surface. So straight out of the box, these panels were super impressive. It seemed really compelling, which to us was important because we use these as our only exterior insulation, and without any sort of membrane outside of them, they were exposed to the elements right under a rain screen siding. The boards are made from wood pulp, which is, I'm told, 100% FSC certified kind of byproduct from operations in the Black Forest in Germany. So it is a German product, and it's shipped here on containers. Let's go forward. Oops. So, the critical question I'm sure all of you have in mind, and I think what we had in mind is like, why use this product, right? It's comes down to the carbon footprint. So let's just get it out of the way. Here's what we understand about this product. This is taken from Beam Estimator, and you can kind of see down here, the highlighted box, that's a net carbon emissions associated with this product. And just comparing it to other board installations you might use on any construction. The critical thing for us was considering biogenic carbon, which is the carbon that is taken from the environment as the trees are grown and then stored and prevented from being discharged into our atmosphere. So this 3,000 kilogram number, and these numbers are arbitrary, it's 1,000 square feet and certain R value, so ignore the actual numbers, but this number is representing how much carbon is stored in the material, and it offsets the carbon, it more than offsets the carbon taken to produce it. So overall, you're offsetting carbon, you're absorbing it into your project. Of note, Beam is cradle to gate, so it's not taking into account shipping. So definitely a point of thought to compare to those things. But when we first did the LCA, life cycle analysis for our home, we had rock wool. And we're going to use rock wool on it, but it was the #1 largest line item for our carbon footprint, larger than glass, larger than concrete. So just this move going to Gutex really changed the picture of our carbon footprint on our home. Next question, sorry, we'll get through these non-picture slides really quickly. Just needed to get some information out first. So the next kind of major question is, as an architect, how does it perform, right? So this is a quick comparison of different, again, types of insulation, their R value, their permeance, how well do they allow vapor to escape from them if it's trapped behind them. And so we were really stoked on Gutex. It has a decent R value, 3.6 per inch, which is nominally worse than Rockwool. Most people bristle at numbers around 4 or 3.6 because foam manufacturers like to crank up their numbers pretty high, but generally, sorry, that's closed cell, talking about XPS or EPS. These numbers can seem a lot higher, but over time, they generally release those blown agents pretty quickly within the first 10 years and reduce down to about 4.2 per inch. So you're really talking similar categories of insulation value. The big difference for us with Gutex and Rockwool were the permeance. And in terms of our assembly, we needed this thing to breathe. It's outside the envelope. It's going to get wet. There will be leaks, I'm sure, over the 200 years this thing stands. We need it to be able to breathe and not create problems. So that's a great permeance, and that's why we chose it. We also ran a quick cost comparison. This is not representative of what costs are now. This is just our direct experience back in 2021. We priced out Rockwool, and it was way more expensive than what Gutex ended up being. So we're happy to land where we landed. So we made the purchase, and as mentioned, it comes from Germany. It's in shipping containers. We bought 32 pallets, which filled up 2 containers. That's what we needed for our house. They were shipped to the port of Seattle. So we're only an hour and a half from Seattle. So that leg of the journey is relatively short, expedited. They were detained in the port for a number of weeks. We worked with 475, the supplier, to figure out why, and they helped us, but that was definitely a scheduling difficulty. Then they showed up at the site in 2 big box trucks, kind of staggered 1 hour apart, and Annie had to run that telehandler all day to unload them. And it's a logistical hurdle that I think we knew what we were getting into, but it was far different than this little Rockwool picture over here of them coming in little bags you can just kind of hand off, load, and carry up. It's a total different scale of understanding. They become kind of shrink wrapped really nicely in plastic. Seems to protect them quite well. We didn't have any problems with that.
They were pristine.
So here's our build. It's how are we doing on time? We didn't start the timer. It's a timber frame, 4 feet on center. And basically we just span these bays with sheathing, which is a little bit unusual, but we cover the whole thing with a vapor impermeable membrane. It's a persist type assembly, if you're familiar with that. But basically the question is, how do you kind of add 6 inches of insulation on those walls and 14 on the roof on the outside? We're not doing any insulation inside the walls here. So this is kind of the setup. And here's a decent picture to start to describe the system we used. It's that 6-inch board coming up out of the ground. We did have Rockwool below grade. You don't want to use Gutex below grade. It's a wood product, definitely for use up to 6 inches above grade. The critical thing here was these structural girts. Generally, you want your rain screen girts applied vertically. Because of our framing and the structural requirements, these things are actually part of our structural system, clamping of our rain screen siding to our structure and distributing loads. So the Gutex was really cool because it has pretty insanely rigid compressive strength. We needed to crank these screws down very hard to get this to work, and the Gutex barely deformed. Definitely a lot different than something like Rockwool or foam. So we were very pleased with that. And over here is kind of a description of the screws. They were like, 8 to 12 inch screws, maybe 14 on the roof. Or actually more, I guess. But one of them goes straight in and one of them goes up at an angle, and it creates a little truss so that this thing resists gravity and doesn't just slump down over time.
And we definitely had to create a jig to drive them straight back into our framing members inside.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of like the really excellent reasons why we use Gutex. And then I'm going to talk about some of the unique qualities and challenges of using Gutex. One thing that we enjoyed a little bit less than working with the pure Gutex was working with a product called Viscon on the left in this image. It's a fluid liquid acrylic air barrier coating, essentially. And the manufacturer recommends that you apply this to any surface of Gutex that you cut and around openings and any penetrations through the Gutex. Painted on, pretty innocuous, safe to work with, all that good stuff. But there was a little bit of a drying time and a pre-planning. So we ended up with this staged approach where we would just pre-paint a whole bunch, let them dry for a couple hours, and then come back to using them later. Also, because of its amazing compressive strength, it's a bit of a bear to cut. It's definitely power tool territory. So we use a circular saw. This man in this picture is using a chainsaw. We unfortunately didn't take any great videos of using our circular saw, but multi-tool, things like that would be really helpful. Also, because it's 6 inches thick, or the product we used is 6 inches thick, we had to saw on both sides. It was 2 circular saw passes to get our panels to conform to the shape of our house. Mostly we were able to put them up in a field, so that wasn't a problem, but it took some time. And then the other kind of weird thing that happens to us, and we understood that this was very irregular, is the product is supposed to come with these perfect tongue and groove patterns, right? On the right, you see this is how it's stacked coming out of the pallet. It's beautiful. Unfortunately, some of the panels that we got had irregular grooves and tongues, so they didn't always go together well. In the end, we estimated that that was about 10% of our order, and we just set those aside. We knew we had to cut a lot of the panels that went up on the gable, on the roof, and things like that, so we just set those aside and cut the edges off anyway. But that was another little hurdle along the way. Again, he mentioned that we're not professional builders. We're not professional builders, we're architects. So we came up with some really creative solutions for getting at our 35-foot tall structure to do all the detailing and final installation that we needed. Platforms, harnesses, we were always wearing harnesses when we were up high. In the end, it was kind of fun. And as we were chasing up the installation, so we put 6 inches on the walls, right? We had to plan for that 14-inch thick installation on the roof by extending the girts. That was our primary nailer for applying the siding later on, so very important. And you can also see we devised these deep window boxes to flush out with our final, the Gutex plus the rain screen plus the board and batten siding we were going to apply. So it was quite a beefy, pancake at the top of the roof when it's all said and done. And then on that roof, to achieve that 14 inches of Gutex, sort of have like best case scenario on the left and like worst case scenario on the right. So on the left, we had another jig to help us drive I think they were 18-inch long screws,
right.
back into that little framing member down below. We got most of them, amazingly. The jigs really helped. We were installing this roof insulation coming toward fall, so the rain started coming. And just over the course of foot traffic, staging the panels, our harness ropes, some rain, a lot of the surface on the Gutex got a little damaged. I think we probably lost some of our paraffin coating, and it started to kind of break away in those really high traffic areas. So that's something to consider. And then in the areas of the roof where we had a nailer behind our sheathing seams below, we had to break the Gutex, and then we went back in and packed that cavity with mineral wool. Actually, we had some left over from the foundation insulation, and it was just a little bit easier to work with. We could hand cut it in the field and had less compressive strength, so we were able to pack it into those cavities. So we also made the decision to overwinter our insulation on the left. It did great it comes as a product. Gutex says it's rated for 3 months of exposure. We ended up leaving ours for about 6 months just due to our construction schedule. And then we started siding in the spring. And you can see on the right our reverse board and batten going up. All that spacing was coordinated with our windows and the overall structure of the building. And it flushed out due to that amazing compressive strength that really helped keep the girts relatively in plane with each other. So the siding went up fairly easily. And then now we have our completed home. So solar panels on the roof and all that siding covering up the Gutex. So yeah, that was our Gutex journey. We're happy to answer some questions and talk more about it.